Hi, everyone. I'm Lori Ann. I am that gal from Mississauga, Ontario, Canada, and I'm with.
I am that guy. I am Roy Miller from Dallas, Texas. Welcome to our Lift Your Story podcast.
So, in this podcast, I'm really excited. I've been wanting to have Scott Burnside on my podcast for quite a while, and we finally have him. And we met way back when I was in high school. And I remember when I was moving away, I got a beautiful book from him and it was signed. And then years later, I got another book from him that he actually wrote and he signed it for my mother, who was so excited. Scott, we're just going to introduce you as a person who started off in a small town reporter. And wow, you've moved along with writing a book called Deadly Innocence, which we'll chat a bit as well about, and then ESPN. So pretty exciting. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, I've been excited, Lori. It's terrific to join you and Roy. And yeah, it's been a minute or two since Westminster High School, and I don't know what made me think of it the other day, but you probably won't remember this, but my parents, we lived outside of the city. I took the bus into the city of London, Ontario. We lived outside of London in Delaware. And you know what made me think of it the other day, though, but that was sometimes my friends along the way, I used to regale them with stories of being in the local 4-H beef club when I lived in Delaware and when you and I knew each other. And so occasionally I get an email addressed to Scotty 4-H or something like that. But that was part of my life there long before I walked down or walked through the journalism door. So
I do remember that, by the way, believe it or not. Yep. So Roy, do you have a question for Scott?
Well, yeah, of course, the obvious question is, what's it like to be with ESPN? I mean, that's got to be a huge thing from when you were in high school. I mean, I know you probably wanted to be a journalist and you had a lot of dreams and goals, but, to be on ESPN, what's that like?
That's a couple of employers ago, actually, but no, I spent 13 years at ESPN.com and occasionally made my way onto the network and pretty regular. I would say regular. Once a year, right around the NHL trade deadline, we would gather in Bristol at the campus headquarters for ESPN and do all kinds of NHL trade stuff. I was 13 years with ESPN covering the National Hockey League, and I covered 3 Olympic tournaments with them, 2 World Cup of Hockey tournaments. So yeah, no, it was, but I don't know whether Laura has this, sort of, when you think about when you're, trying to imagine what your life is going to be like and what you're going to do. I mean, I had no sense, and certainly growing up in Ontario, it wasn't until I was much, much older that had any sense of what ESPN was, or even the idea of being a sports reporter. And, just to go back to the beginning, like I moved not too long after Lori moved from the London area. I ended up in outside of Windsor, Ontario, and I went to a rural high school, Essex District High School. So I think there were 50 in our graduating class. And I remember meeting with the guidance counselor early in my senior year. I had no idea what I wanted to do. I knew I liked to write. And so the guidance counselor, well, you should go to Carleton University in Ottawa and take their journalism program. I knew nothing of journalism and certainly didn't have any, grand aspirations to be a journalist of any kind. But I ended up going there. But, my parents and I don't even know. We have a son who's a freshman at college. And I think about all of the discussions that we had as a family leading up to his decision to go to school. And I don't really remember having, really any of those kinds of discussions with my parents. I was like, well, I think I'm going to go here. And they're like, all right, okay. So, and that was what happened. And, sort of the dominoes sort of fell from that. But, and I made, my transition to ESPN came after covering the Paul Bernardo, Carla Homolka, story and ultimately the trial back in the mid 90s. And as Lori mentioned, I ended up working with a colleague of mine at the Toronto Sun, Al Cairns, who's since passed away. And we wrote a book. And at the end of that, I needed to do something different. It was a long, difficult journey. I spent a lot of time covering the story and working on the book. And at the end of it, I really wanted to do something different. And I ended up moving into sports, and that's been 20 some years ago. And so that's how, that's how the pivot from being a news guy and covering something like the Bernardo Homolka case to, periodically showing up on television with ESPN and writing for them for 13 years. It doesn't seem like a natural transformation, but I feel obviously very fortunate that it turned out that way.
To go back to writing a book a little bit, what's it like to have to write a true crime story?
Yeah, that's and again, I'm speaking for Al Cairns now, my partner and I, but we didn't set out to do it. I knew Al. We'd met at the Windsor Star. I was a young reporter there. And he moved to Toronto, was working at the Toronto Sun. He was tremendous. He was old school Brit, old Fleet Street kind of guy, hard boiled, and nobody covered crime like Al Cairns. And we ended up working together on the story in its infancy. The disappearance of two teenage girls in the Niagara region, long before an arrest. And so he and I ended up working as a team for a long time covering the story. And we were approached by Warner Books, owned by Time Warner at the time. And they came to us and said, would you consider doing this? And I remember, have the conversation, geez, I don't know, what would that be like? And could we continue to do what we were doing as reporters and dovetail it to a broader project? I think certainly the paper, the Toronto Sun, had no issue with it. I think they felt it helped our reporting. And we were young, and people sometimes ask, well, would you want to write another book or write, it's like, no way. Like it was hard. And, again, you think about your own mortality and these sorts of things. And Al passed away after a long illness, must be 2 years ago or 2.5 years ago. And Laura and I were talking, I was part of a documentary that's now on Discovery Plus that revisited the case, the conviction came in the fall of 1995. So it's a long time ago, but people are so fascinated by it because it's a terrible, tragic story, and it affected a lot of people, and it had a lot of issues in terms of censorship and public's right to know and how the court system works, all those kinds of things. And so it still resonates for a lot of people, but it was strange to go back and answer questions and think about all of those things that were part of our daily lives for, I started covering it in 1992, right through to the literally till the time I left and became a sports columnist in early 96 or so. So yeah, it's strange how it, sort of for something that dominates your life for a long time, and then you move away from it, and then you're asked to, to remember details. It's a strange sensation.
How was that? So I'm sorry, psychologically, that must have been really difficult, because that's one of the worst cases ever in Canada.
Yeah, I always, when people ask about what it was like to cover it, and certainly the emotion and the, the images and the things that you remember and the things that you heard as part of the reporting. Listen, that was my job. And so I got paid to be there every day. And so listen, it was hard for for a lot of people, for those of us who were there every day. It was very, very difficult, and it's stuff that stays with you for a long time. But I always reluctant to be, it's suggested, compared to the families of those girls and the police who investigated and the court staff, and there were a whole other sort of group of people whose experiences were much more connected or involved than the reporters who covered it. Now, I'm not minimizing. There were lots of people who it changed them forever, and I think anyone who was in that courtroom or saw it or listened to the evidence over that period of time probably went away and were never the same. But it's heartbreaking, and it's you just think of the ways that were not to go into too many of the details based on our time limits here or whatever, but Paul Bernardo was a serial rapist, and so his victims numbered, I think there were close to 20, and those victims have to live their lives dealing with that. There were also 3 young girls who died as a result of Paul Bernardo and Carla Homolka. And you think about what was lost there and their families, and what they, with every day that loss is there for them. So it's, I think it's important to remember it for that reason. And so that, when the documentary people called, I felt it was important to share whatever it was that they wanted to know from me. And I watched the series. I thought it was well done and tasteful. And, but it's a hard thing. I've been covering mostly hockey, but sports for, 2.5 decades, I feel very fortunate to be able to cover a game. I feel fortunate about that, especially given some of the what I did earlier in my career.
Absolutely. And yes, you're right. So I was just going to say that series was really well done. And there were a lot of things that I didn't even know, because like you said, being in Canada, there were a lot of things that they just didn't put out there. His 20, I didn't know that there were that many. I don't know if I was just lost and not wanting to hear any more about it. But yes, it was very well done.
You were on that thing for 3 years. I can't imagine the toll that took on you, because I was on a jury for 1 week, and that really affected me. It was so bad that I couldn't even talk about it. Even now, if I was going to talk about it, I'd get choked up.
Yeah.
I mean, and I can't imagine doing that for 3 years. I can't wrap my head around that.
Yeah. It's interesting because, the court system in Canada is obviously a lot different than it is in the United States. And, I remember, I think the trial lasted 6 weeks, and it was a jury trial. And there was a lot of video evidence, and some of it wasn't shown to the general public or the media, although we heard the audio of everything. But the jury saw everything, and just unbelievable, like just crushing stuff. It's just crushing. And even though we couldn't interview the jurors during the trial, but there was I don't want to say, I don't know whether kinship is the right word or not, but the jurors recognized, we were in the media section. We sat in the same seats every single day. They knew who we were and the job that we were doing. We knew the job they were doing. And, afterwards, I remember Al Cairns, my partner, ended up on I want to say a Maury Povich show with 1 or 2 of the jurors. And there was a real, it was a shared experience. There's no question about it. And so, Roy, I'm not surprised at all to hear you say that. And there's an enormous responsibility if you're up on a anytime you're in a jury, but if it's something, a horrific crime, and we're talking about crime and punishment and things that will affect people for decades and for all of people's lives. I totally get it, and there's no question that the Bernardo trial, had a deep and lasting impact on the jurors who decided that case.
Yeah, I mean, we were crying, the whole jury.
Yeah.
I mean, it was horrific to sit and listen to.
So, where are you going from here, Scott?
Literally, and tomorrow I'm going to fly to Raleigh and the start of the NHL playoffs. Well, the end of the regular season and then the start of the playoffs. So I was at ESPN for 13 years. I spent a year at the Dallas Stars. I'm disappointed I didn't run into Roy though while I was in Dallas. So I
was there a few times now.
Well, you might have run into my wife or my son whenever they came to visit. They sat in the same seats. We love Dallas, and I spent a year working for the Dallas Stars, and I traveled with the team, writing about them, doing some TV and podcasts, and spent 4 years at The Athletic, which is a paid website devoted to sports, which was recently purchased by the New York Times. And now I do, I work for Daily Faceoff, which is another national publication, do a podcast every week, cover the NHL as sort of on a national level. And that I also do some writing for the Carolina Hurricanes. So I do some longer form writing. I do some television for them, and appear on podcasts whenever they need an extra voice to drone on about hockey for 20 minutes or 25 minutes. But it's, it's interesting. I've been doing, the sports part of it so long that, I'll run into coaches or GMs, and I knew them as young players. Or there's the coach of the Ottawa Senators, this guy named DJ Smith. When I first met him, he was a captain of the junior team in Windsor. And whenever we run into each other, I'm like, oh, that's a long time ago. That's even almost as long as you and I have known each other, Lori. So we're talking about the annals of time there. So it's fun, and it's I still get a kick out of it, and the again, you cover a game for a living. I used to, sometimes journalists complain. It's what we do, right? We complain about whatever, travel or editors or deadlines. And I try to complain as little as possible, given my lot in life, that's for sure.
Were you with the Stars when they won the Cup?
I was not. That was 1999. Now that would be that. I'm old, Roy, but I'm not quite that old. So, no, 99. I was at the National Post actually in Toronto in 99. So I was not. I was there only for the 2017-18 season. Didn't quite make the playoffs. So that was. I'll take the blame for that. So I think they made the playoffs every year since I've been gone.
So did you guys graduate from high school, what, 95 or what?
No, before that. I want to say it, Laura. You go ahead, say it out loud.
Oh, gosh, I think it was 1979 for high school. No, it was later, 1980.
Yeah.
80. I moved to Montreal, though, so it was sort of different. I kind of lost a year. And you're younger than me, Scott, so don't call yourself old, okay? Because I remember that. You had moved up a grade, right? You were in my grade.
I did move up a grade, and that means I'm 25 now. So that's just what that means. So no, I think you're right, Lori. I'm just not think I graduated in 80 from college in 85, went to teachers college at Ottawa U, and that was probably 86. So yeah, no, it's been a long time, Roy. It's been a long time.
My university was 1984, that I know.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
And what about you, Roy?
I graduated from high school in 1969.
Summer of love.
Yep. I grew up in the good years, except for the Vietnam War.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Well, this was wonderful, Scott. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I really, really appreciate you being here and And I was just saying that, like it was funny because somebody, Dominique, by the way, who we're going to have, she sent me a picture of the Discovery Network about Homolka, Paul Bernardo Homolka. And I said, yes, I'm having one of the people on there on my podcast. She goes, oh, really? So, and yes, and I still have this book here. And my mother was just so excited. And she keeps asking if I've spoken to you because you literally signed one for her. But Scott, you never got me mine.
I will tell you, I'm sure they're hard to come by now. Frankly, they're now almost antiques. So that's how much time has passed there. But it's great, and I appreciate your questions and having me aboard, and I'm always happy if you're ever wanting for, again, someone to drone on for a few minutes, happy to jump aboard.
So, Lorianne, basically what he's saying is, if you go to a garage sale and find a book, send it to him, he'll sign it for you.
Perfect.
You send it COD, I'll look after that, because as long as it's in Canadian funds, I think I can swing it.
Yeah.
Oh, well, hey, Scott, if the Stars ever win the Cup, I expect you to, write about them.
Well, that goes without saying. They have a huge game tonight, and if they do go on a long playoff run, and I make my way to Dallas, Roy, I will look you up, and we'll you can. Yeah.
I would love to meet you in person so I can take a selfie and send it to Lorianne.
Oh.
All right, that sounds like a deal. And
funny, you didn't make any jokes about the Maple Leafs while we were talking.
Well, I was just going to say, if the Maple Leafs make it to a Cup final, I may be in town for that. So we'll do the same. We'll send a picture to Roy.
Scott. All right. Well, thanks again. And we will be in touch.
Yeah. Keep in touch anytime. Always happy to join.
Love meeting you, Scott.
Yeah. All right. Take care.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.